I'm Dawn Melvin, Tribal Tourism Manager at the Arizona Office of Tourism, and I will be your host for the series. Through cultural connections, we will visit each of the 22 tribes in Arizona to learn about the history and culture, to bring us insights on the development of economic enterprises and the future of cultural tourism. Each tribe will share their stories of growth and how they overcame obstacles to develop vibrant tourism attractions and activities. Today, we will hear from Longfeather Benjamin Brave Fox with the Hualapai Business Incubator Training. Longfeather is Hualapai, Yavapai, Lakota, and Cree descent. He's a graduate of Arizona State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science and a certificate in International Studies. His experiences include public service as the first Native American firefighter in Mojave County. In the tourism and hospitality realm, Longfeather served as a cultural ambassador at the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, where he led VIP tours for celebrities and contributed to the national accolades for Grand Canyon West. Currently, he works in the economic development field with Thrive Hualapai, a tribal business incubator, and is the founder of Innativators, a nonprofit STEM education in tribal communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Longfeather. Gamu.
Good for you. And thank you, Don. And thank you to all who joined and registered. I really do appreciate, taking the time coming out. I really did was honored to be a part of this, the first of this series. We're down here in Phoenix, downtown Phoenix. We got the Arizona Office of Tourism. If you guys look right behind me, you see that huge, newly branded Arizona Office of Tourism. What do they call those? The medallion or but I know the story behind that and the presentation behind the actual Mendola, or I believe what it's called, is it's representative of Arizona, and they took the native design, or they took the actual design to make it incorporated of all of Arizona, not just the 22 tribes of Arizona, but if you notice, within it, the insignias, it has, some agricultural designs, some IT designs, it has, the innovative designs, it has, really kind of bringing all of Arizona together. And I believe that's very, very, very not only responsive of the Arizona Office of Tourism, but it's also, as Arizonans, my fellow Arizonans out there, I honestly believe, we live in the best state in the entire, United States of America. I can't, even think, where, life would be like in another state, just because, we really do, we're blessed. We're, I would say, in the creator's country because, we get to experience all seasons. We have, winters, summers, springs, falls. We have, just in the Hualapai Reservation alone, we have, the largest ponderosa pine forest. And all throughout Arizona, you have different landscapes. And, that all really comes together and it encompasses what Arizona actually is. And again, I appreciate, Don Melvin, huge shout out to the Arizona Office of Tourism. Very, very proud and pleased to be here today, just to give some kind of insight into the tribes of Arizona. As many of you may or may not know, Arizona has 22 federally recognized tribes, and I'm here to talk about the Hualapai tribe. I'm a tribal member. I'm blessed to be a part of that tribe. Um, I am, my name does stem from a lot of my cultural heritage, my cultural significance. I have my TikTok over here live, Chief Chingasos. So I'm trying to do a little bit of streaming, a little bit of everything going on. However, let's just jump right in it. So again, the historical context of the Hualapai people. So out of the 22 tribes in Arizona, 11 tribes actually speak the same dialect, and we call them like sister tribes almost. So 11 of these tribes speak the human dialect, and the human language is actually a subgroup of the Hokan language. The Hokan language is actually a much larger group that incorporates, I would say, the Paiutes, the Shoshone, the Chumash. They all speak a dialect of Hokan. But the most southern Hokan language is the human dialect. And 11 of those human speaking tribes all reside within Arizona. You know, again, 22 tribes of Arizona, 11 of them sister tribes. And the Hualapai, thankfully, we are just the closest that live to our origin, our creation story. So briefly, I brought some, visual aids here. So this book, The Long Journey from Wikimedia, was actually written after my great great grandfather, Kate Crozier, who was a tribal elder, a tribal leader. And this book just kind of documents his journey into spirituality and his journey from Wikimedia. So in the native culture and in the Wallapai culture, I know a lot of people have heard, like a vision quest. So my great great grandfather embarked on this vision quest where he walked from essentially the reservation where it's located now in Peach Springs all the way to Wikimeya, which is a mountain range right on the other side of the Colorado River from Arizona. So if you guys are geographically, you kind of know Arizona, we'll have on this side of the river is Arizona, the Colorado, and then on the other side there's a small called Laughlin, Nevada, a small township. And behind that, there's a mountain range, and it's called, Wikimeya, or Spirit Mountain. So I know it's very significant to a lot of the tribes, especially the 11 human-speaking tribes in Arizona. That again, that's our creation, that's our origin story, that's where we came from. I'll briefly touch into that. So in the beginning, so if you close your eyes and you really kind of get with me, close your eyes. And in the beginning, in biblical terms, in the darkness, sticking out once the water receded, because there was a great flood. And we all know, we've heard of, Noah's Ark, and we've heard of the flooding of the land. So once the water finally receded, there was two gods left on Wikimeya. There was a young god and an old god. And the old god, who was old, very old, and he was beginning to realize that his end was imminent. So he turned and he looked to the young God, and he told the young God, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be around very much longer. I think, you need to make man. And so the young God listened to the old God, took reeds of grass, and he went along the riverbanks, and he planted these reeds of grass along the riverbank. And upon that night, when he went to sleep, he woke up to laughter. He woke up to people talking. He woke up to just a riverbank full of inhabitants. Now, all these people were all the 11 human tribes of Arizona, especially the Hualapai, the Mojaves. But I'm not going to touch too much on those tribes because, through the Arizona Tourism University, which, you guys are live right now, and the Arizona Office of Tourism, those tribes will have a chance to come and tell their story of their people and their historical context. But as part of the Hualapai, so once we were created by the young God, we all gathered on the riverbanks of the Colorado River, and life was good. We didn't know anything other than just living, surviving. Um, Unfortunately, as things tend to happen, there was a conflict within that time period. And that conflict was between two young brothers, and I don't want to, again, we have a cultural resources department located in Peach Springs, Arizona. You can find any of this information, the creation story. They can go more in depth. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick overview. And, we can definitely contact that department and they can give you the entirety of the creation story with all the God characters and everybody kind of associated with it. But briefly, essentially there was two young brothers. They got in a fight. They started this quarrel. And as it tends to happen, with families, this young brother went and got his older sister, and this young brother went and got his older brother, and they went and got their uncles and their cousins and their aunts. And pretty soon it was a divided group of two people pitted against one another. And essentially that conflict had ended with, the young god finally coming down, and talking to the people and kind of telling them, hey, like, this isn't why you were created. This isn't why you are here. We're supposed to live in perfect harmony. We're supposed to rely on each other. We're related. This is family. So he ended up confounding the entire riverbank of people. They all got different languages. They all were told to leave that riverbank. We're told to go through for us, to go through the Hualapai, to go through the Grand Canyon. And once you get to a place where you think that your people can survive or your people belong, you will emerge from the canyon and that will be your homeland. So, located in the Grand Canyon near Spencer Canyon, there's a special sacred place to the Hualapai called Madwika. And Madwika is the place where the Hualapai had actually emerged from the Grand Canyon and came out. And that's where we stepped out onto the plain and we declared ourselves Hualapai. Now, the creation story goes on for the other tribes, the other 10 other tribes. They went further east, they went further south. For us, you have, the Peeposh of the Maricopa. They came all the way down here into the Phoenix area. For the Yavapais, I know they emerged from Boit Knot Canyon in Sedona, and that's where they kind of emerged, and that's their homeland or their ancestral homeland. So that would be the origin story, the creation story in terms of where the Hualapai people actually kind of descended from. And that's why Wikimeya, again, as noted in the book, that's why Wikimeya is so sacred to the Hualapai people. And I just want to give a huge shout out to the Paiutes and the Chemehuevis and the Mojaves. I know in recent political contexts, they've done a lot to actually preserve and get Wikimeya declared as like a national or historical mountain range. Um, but for the Wallapais, our story doesn't stop there because again, we're talking about in time and memoriam, right? So as the Wallapai people, the region that we've originated from ancestrally was seven encompassed, I would say, from the Grand Canyon down to the Baja Peninsula into northern Mexico. And we have sister tribes down, the Pai Pai, they occupy that area down there. But all through that region are just bands of Wallapais. And it's significant because Wallapais were very nomadic ancestrally, we didn't stay in one place. And again, we go back to that theme where life is water. And all throughout northwestern Arizona and Arizona in general, you have springs. And so everywhere there was a spring, you would get, a band of Wallapai. So if you think in terms of like Peach Springs, there's a spring there. Dolan Springs, there's a spring there. Chloride Springs, there's a spring there. The Hualapai Mountains, they have a spring. Kingman has Beale Springs. So all these springs, there would be a band of Hualapai in that general area. So the Hualapai tribe, which was federally recognized in 1883, it is only a consolidation of 13 different tribal bands. And if you guys look at the slide right up top, you'll see from the top the Hualapai Mountain bands all the way down to the Big Sandy bands. And I think we even have the Havasupai in there as well. And again, hopefully, the Havasupai will get their chance to come up and kind of give you guys their story. But for us, the Hualapai, we didn't really think of ourselves as one tribe or one band as we continue to survive throughout, the arid deserts and the mountainous regions of Arizona. Again, very nomadic. So in the winters, we would head south and live on the southern tips of the northern parts of Mexico. We would live in the southern Arizona along the riverbanks. And then again, in the summers when it got too hot to be in those areas, we would migrate north. So traditional diet and fare, traditional foods, were surviving right in the desert. You got to think, in this time there were no grocery stores, there were no markets, there was no domesticated livestock, everything was game. small game at that. Primarily the main diet for the Hualapai at the time, or these different bands, was probably small game like rabbits, squirrels, prairies, snakes, and I know, we don't want to touch too much into what they ate, but again, I mean, you got to think in survivalistic terms and be realistic to actual, the plight and the human struggle to survive and the human will to survive. Um, Again, some of the more kind of I would say, I don't want to say botanist or ethnobotanist, but more of the food that we got from the plants. You're looking at like banana yuccas, prickly pears, barrel cactus. So a lot of they made do with what they had. So it's funny, because once we meet, tourism or tourists, they ask you, well, what did you guys eat as a people, and in reality, we were just trying to survive, and you're talking nuts, piñons. We were eating, anything that we can find that was provided some sort of nutritional substance. That's what our people were eating, and we didn't have, the luxury of having these fine kitchens and really having these gourmet meals. In reality, we were just surviving, which. Is it a testament to our people today? It's a testament to the will and the survival and the really the resiliency of the Hualapai people and all, tribal bands and all tribes that were in Arizona, because life in the beginning was tough and it was rough, and that we were, the people who were there. So we'll continue along. First documented recording of the Hualapai people was in 1604 when a Spanish explorer, I believe his last name was Onate, Onate, with a little apostrophe. I'm not too sure how you even pronounce that. But he was the first documented Spanish explorer to actually write in his journal of the Hualapai people, and he put that in his diary, which later on would come back to help us in our fight for our reservational lands and our fight for our ancestral homelands. Having some documented I guess record of our existence really went a long way when we had to go to the Arizona court, when we had to go to the United States Supreme Court and say, hey, we've been here long before the Eastern migration of Western Europeans. So as we keep going, 1604 was the first documented, and there was no more contact, or there wasn't any more contact until after 1776. And that's again when a Spanish priest came to the area on a missionary mission. But before that, in that time span and in this ancestral time span, you look at migration and trading routes. We're looking at say, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary or the bicentennial of Route 66. So Route 66 is actual a native trading route. That was an actual highway for ancestral indigenous people to trade with one another. And there's documented records of wallapais, fashioning seashells. So in 1776, when the Spanish priest actually came back to Arizona, he was kind of shocked because there was Hualapai actually wearing Spanish belts. They were wearing Spanish jewelry. They were wearing, and he couldn't figure out where they had gotten all of this the wardrobe, where they gotten these, they were wearing seashells, And again, it goes back to the trading and the migrating routes. Route 66 was just kind of asphalted over, and boom, you have a road that connects the eastern United States, or the eastern continental United States, to the western continental United States. But that route, that trading route, was in existence and used long before 1926. So it's just interesting when you go back into your history and you look at the Hopis, who were a major proponent of trading, and they were the major proponents of actually using that route to trade with the say the Chumash on the western coast, and they were trading seashells, and along the way they would stop with the Wallapais, and they would trade with them their clay and their paint and their pottery and their furs. And so long before we had these eastern, or the western eastern European influence, we had a transportation system. So culturally, again, the Wallapais, we are oral in our terms of traditions and stories that we kind of pass down. A huge kind of aspect of the Wallapai culture and a lot of the cultures in the Southwest is bird singing and bird dancing. There's a great, documentary out there, and I wish we could have had the clip of it, but really tells kind of the story of how our uniqueness from any other Native American tribe in North America is all of our stories were passed down through song and dance, and all of our stories were passed down through song, these bird songs that, these bird gatherings that you see these days, which have really been kind of reinvigorated. And it warms my heart as a Wallapai, and it warms my heart as a member of those tribes to have, this movement of this generation, of mine and the younger generations who are really picking up, this tradition of ours and creating these large gatherings and singing the songs. And it's amazing. And it really, again, is a testament to the strength as we show as a people, the resiliency as we show as a people. So fast forward, 1776 is the second documented time where, we were documented in a journal and the history books. But again, at this time, 1776 in the United States, you got to think of the United States Constitution as being signed. The Revolutionary War is about to kick off. So, our area or territorial plains, on paper belong to, Spain. So, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between, outsiders outside of our own tribes and outside of our own bands. Uh, so where are we at in terms of the reservation? So now, the Wallapais are located in Peach Springs, Arizona, and the encompassing on the map you can see it kind of outlined. It's kind of like I wouldn't say a horseshoe shaped reservation, but that general area is almost, 99,700. It's near 1 million acres. Why, the Wallapai couldn't just round up and get 1 million acres? This just, bureaucracy, I would say. But, in 1883, the Wallapai were actually founded or federally recognized, and that 1 million acres was reserved and put aside for the Wallapai people. But what we can't forget is how we got there. So I know we didn't, but an important date to remember is April 21st, 1874. And that date is our La Paz, or we call it our La Paz. So in memorial, during this time, all the bands of the Hualapai, again, where there was watering holes, there was life, and that's where you would find a typical band. But as migration came through, the Civil War had ended, so now you got an influx of Europeans coming, heading west, looking for gold, looking for precious minerals. They kind of just overtook these watering holes, overtook these springs, and so it was really created a conflict between the Hualapai bands and the settlers who were coming into the area. They didn't see, or as an indigenous individual, I know we're always kind of in tune with the land, and we don't see an ownership of that land. We're a part of this huge, kind of like the mandala behind us. We're a part of something greater than just our own existence. We belong to the earth, and we belong to the ecosystem, and we're a huge part of that. So the ownership of us over land is kind of like a foreign ideal and a foreign thought. But as we had, again, the Civil War had just ended. You have all these individuals coming westward looking for precious minerals and mines. So there was a huge conflict, and you get into the area or the time of period where they called the Wallapai Wars. And I want to say it was between 1860, either 1856 to 1866 was during that time. There was a lot of resistance and there was a lot of uprising or against, coming back to your home and, having saying that they own it now. So in the context of history, you look at, say, you get an old photo of like Kingman, Arizona, and then you'll see, the Kingman, the township, it's spawning up, and then you'll see on the outskirts of town there would be like an Indian encampment or an Indian camp. And it wasn't because, our bands were trying to live off of, the townships or live off of, the town and be on the outskirts of society or that was our ancestral homeland. So to us, we were home, we weren't, trying to be, I guess, vagrants, on the outskirts of civilization during those times. We were in our own elements. That was our home. That was where we belonged. So that's where you would find, different bands, again, around these smaller towns in northwestern Arizona. And the conflict that was created with, just the emerging migration west from settlers to, the native inhabitants. It culminated in again in 1971, or not 1971, 1874, where they rounded up all the Hualapai bands at Beale Springs, just outside of Kingman, Arizona, and they force marched them down to the lower La Paz area, which is around kind of Yuma. So the Hualpais, in a sense, and I know historically you have, the Trail of Tears, you have the long walk, from different cultures and different indigenous cultures. Well, this was kind of our Trail of Tears, and this was kind of our long walk where we were forced, rounded up and forcibly marched and removed from our ancestral homelands down to the La Paz area. So that lasted for about a year because after about a year, the Wallapies, they've had enough. So again, April 21st, 1875, the Wallapai escaped the internment camp. They, one by one, they began leaving and they ran home. They ran back to their homelands. So that is actually commemorated every year. April 21st is a huge date for the Hualapai. That's when our ancestors return home. And again, we can't stress enough, or I can't stress enough, how much strength that our ancestors shown, how much resiliency that our ancestors shown. And I kind of put that into context that, us today in this day and age. And I think to myself, like, how can we call ourselves Hualapai, or how can we call ourselves indigenous? How can we call as that DNA kind of courses through our blood, and we're all related. And if you're tuning in from Peach Springs, or you're tuning in from, wherever you're tuning in, if you're Wallapai and if you have a drip or a smidgen of that blood in you, we're related. But within that blood is that DNA is that resiliency that our ancestors have shown over time, that strength that our ancestors have shown over time. So I ask you this, like, how can we call ourselves strong if we don't show strength? How can we call ourselves resilient if we don't show resiliency in this day and age? And today we have our own plights, we have our own issues, our own um, trials as a community that we have to walk through, and we need to summon that strength. We need to summon that resiliency. And thankfully, our ancestors showed, that resiliency in returning from the La Paz in 1875. And again, 1883, Hualapai Scouts, they actually helped or assisted with, during the Apache Wars, and I don't want to say, too much because, that's a different tribe and I don't want to step on, anyone else's uh, because they're going to have their own time to come up here and kind of present their own tribe. But for us, that kind of our assistance with the United States Cavalry in those Apache wars is kind of what gave the Hualapai such a larger plot of land or such a larger reservation. And you can definitely check out. We are an Indian nation. Um, and this is great information on everything that I've kind of just reviewed and gone over. And it walks you through the stories of everything in terms of how the Wallapai are so resilient, the strength that they've shown. But pick up that book, definitely read it. and it'll walk you through how, the Hualapai Scouts assisted in the capturing and essentially settling Arizona, which is at one point in time was just a wild frontier where, we had the Hualapai Wars, the Apache Wars, the United States Cavalry, everybody was fighting over trading routes, even, the history with Bill Williams, or the history with as we get down in this area, the Haydens, and it's all kind of just together. So as we march through time, we don't want to spend too much time on the negative connotations of how we got here today. So, but the Wallapai, again, showing their resiliency, had started, tourism enterprises for economic development and economic building. Um, but really fast, again, the Wallapai unity didn't really show up until about the 1930s, late 1930s, early 1940s, with the Santa Fe versus the Wallapai tribe. Again, as I mentioned previously, we had a lot of documentation. They're called the Wallapai Papers. So the Wallapais actually went to the United States Supreme Court for the reservation that you see now. So, I mean, again, there's so much history in the context of moving through, and you can't just summarize it all. So if you get a chance, please visit Peach Springs, Arizona. Go to the culture department and speak to the staff there. Marcy Cranen, huge shout out to her. She's been working there for 23 years. She can help you in any historical context that you may need. The creation story, traditions, culture, practices. I know they host, basket weaving. They host, gourd making. So they do a lot of great and fantastic things just to keep the preservation of the culture alive. So shout out to the Wallapai Culture Department. I hope you guys are watching. Thank you for the photos, by the way. But as we continue to march through, we gotta start touching on the more resiliency that we've shown and the foresight that our tribal leaders have had before us. So let's take a look. 1973, the Wallapai tribe actually started the very first all Native American owned whitewater rafting trip, which is still in operation today. The Hualapai River Runners is a 1 day whitewater rafting trip on the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. So we were blessed to have the location. The Grand Canyon, again, as many of us Arizonans know, is 285 miles long, right? Almost the entire span of northern Arizona. The Hualapai tribe owns and operates 110 miles of the west portion of the Grand Canyon. In 1973, the Hualapai River Runners was started. Again, the only all Native American owned whitewater rafting trip. And let me just jump into that really fast because I'm it's now still a tourism operation. It's still in running, but the quality of that tour is amazing. The stories that you'll hear on the river are amazing. The boat guides, just the operation from start to finish is very, very, very undervalued in terms of what you get culturally and what you get to experience. Not only do you have the backdrop of, the Grand Canyon, you have, these towering walls, and you have, literally a timeline of the earth starting at the very top. You can see the Jurassic period, the Triassic period, the Paleo period. You can go down and just look at these timelines of the canyon walls and just see earth in itself. Its birthday is right there. um, you get a lovely, I think you get to visit Travertine Falls, which is a natural waterfall or a natural spring inside the Grand Canyon. Spencer Canyon, I believe they get a stop off on. So definitely check out the Hualapai River Runners. That was established in 1973. And that was the Hualapai's first kind of endeavor into tourism in Arizona. As we wanted to build, or our earlier generations wanted to build something where we're not kind of depending, where we're not still seen as these vagrants on the outskirts of these townships or on the outskirts of Arizona. We wanted to thrive, we wanted to be a part, we wanted to create this economy, and they did, and very much so. So that began in 1973, and then we move fast forward into 1980, I want to say 88, when the tribal council had actually set aside 10 acres of land of the Grand Canyon to develop as a tourism operation. So the Hualapai tribe, outside of Indian gaming, is arguably the I don't want to say the best, but if we're not going to say we're the best, then who's going to say it, right? But I would say we are the most successful Indian tribe outside of Indian gaming in terms of destination tourism, in terms of taking what we've had as far as the Grand Canyon and turning that into a successful tourism operation. Um, it generates well over $100 million a year in terms of revenue, for the Wallapai tribe. It started in 1988, Grand Canyon West. We moved into, I believe, 1996, 97. We opened the Wallapai Lodge, which is a hotel to kind of um, help with the overflow and help with lodging and help with in that time we also opened Diamond Creek Restaurant, which is a restaurant located within the Wallapai Lodge. And since then we've gotten the Wallapai Market. We've gotten so many different enterprises under this Grand Canyon Resort Corporation. And so the umbrella corporation is the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation. The enterprises underneath it are all just an example of the leadership of the Wallapai tribe and the tribal council to kind of continue to develop more tourism enterprises to continue to build an economical foundation for the Wallapai people. And again, I'm so blessed and proud to say that I'm Wallapai, and I hope, my fellow Wallapais watching are extremely proud of our tribe and what they've been able to accomplish. And even today, we're looking at developing, more lands that we have in trust, and we're looking to develop more bigger and better things. And we continue to build upon what we've had out at Grand Canyon West. In 2005 alone, the Wallapai tribe was approached by a private investor, and huge shout out to the Jin family. They really kind of gave us a huge leg up on the competition along the Grand Canyon. In 2007, the Grand Canyon Skywalk was completed. Now that's a completely transparent horseshoe-shaped bridge where tourism is actually, it probably quadrupled our tourism numbers when that first opened. And now we have tourists from all over the world coming to the Grand Canyon Skywalk to walk on our glass bridge. You're suspended roughly, I believe it's like 4,700 and some odd, feet above the Colorado River. And that's roughly like 1,600 meters. So you're definitely walking on the sky once you walk on the Grand Canyon. Again, you're on completely transparent, I want to say like 3.5 inches of glass, and don't quote me because we got some staff out there, they're gonna be like that's completely wrong, but just what we were able to accomplish with that endeavor, and how you know we can say, because we've had shareholders meetings, and we can say that in 2025, the Wallapai tribe has paid off every debt, every loan, every um, and so we own, the Grand Canyon Skywalk outright. It's completely ours. And, so now, again, we are one of the most successful tribes outside of gaming. And we continue to try and flourish, continue to try and develop on top of that. Um, but I think, I've talked a lot during this, but I mean, I'm open to any questions. I know, we did a rough kind of timeline going from, the origin and the history to now, to the tribal enterprises and how we're trying to flourish and thrive. My office, which is Thrive Wallapai, is working with, community members trying to develop small businesses. We're definitely trying to bring forth the entrepreneurs in our community and trying to get them to just create a sustainable economy. So, we don't have to depend on anyone else. And I think that's what sets the Wallapai tribe apart from everyone else. And I just really hope, everyone who's listening, who's watching, You know, you come, you take the trip. I know the 1926 bicentennial for Route 66 is coming straight through Peach Springs, Arizona. So once you're there, you know, stop, stay at the Hualapai Lodge, eat at the Diamond Creek restaurant, you know, get some snacks at the Hualapai Market, get some gas, you know, buy your tickets for Grand Canyon West, go see the Skywalk. You know, there's a zip line, there's the heli pontoon. There's so much that you can do out there in terms of, you know, coming and enjoying the Grand Canyon and enjoying, you know, the things and the what we've created for you guys as guests to kind of experience. So, whew, with that being said, I think I might be just about running into the Q&A portion. So if there's anyone out there, if you guys have any questions, let us know and we'll continue to answer those. But again, I would like to thank Don, thank the Arizona Office of Tourism for allowing us to come out, kind of give our brief history, talk about, you know, the Hualapai people, the resiliency that we have, and you know, thank you guys for tuning in, for listening, and we can open it up to some questions if you guys have some questions.
Well, we want to talk a little bit about how the industry, the tourism industry, might be able to work with the Hualapai tribe. You know,
Awesome, awesome. Great pitch. Love the toss. Thank you, Don. I was drowning for a quick second. No, no, no. But so if you want to work with the Hualapai tribe, definitely. So the Grand Canyon Resort Corporation, you know, for film and photography, filming requests, definitely reach out to Michelle Holmes. She's the executive administrative assistant to the board of directors. And she's really kind of like the point of contact if you were looking to film, if you're looking to come out, if you want to do any type and we've worked with, you know, film industries in the past. We've worked with, you know, we've had several films filmed out at Grand Canyon West, several music videos. The latest, it didn't make the cut, but I know personally that the latest movie that was filmed out there was the last Avengers movie or the last Spider-Man film. They shot a few scenes out there, but you know I think it got snipped in the early portion of it. But we have had Hollywood out, so
that's
please,
exciting. Yes, people want to come out and see what there is to do.
yeah, please come out again. Contact information, Michelle Holmes, and then she'll definitely get you in touch with the right people and kind of just the process of how, you know, our filming permits and everything kind of works.
Okay. And then for the industry, if they want to come out and bring journalists or tour operators to visit and experience firsthand.
So for familiarization tours, I know, you know, you want to contact John Wicks. You know, he's the director of sales and marketing. He deals with the contracts. He deals with, you know, ground operators, air operators, fixed wing you know, helicopter tours. Definitely come out and shoot him an email, and you know he'll be able to set you up on a familiarization tour and kind of give you a better insight to the product that's out there, the product that's been developed and how refined it is now. I know we were lucky enough to host, you know, a few agencies over this past few months, and hopefully we get to host, you know, the Arizona Office of Tourism. I know we have an interim CEO and Don, of course, you're always welcome to come out. And if you guys would like to come take a tour, you know, hit up my office, you know, Thrive Wallapai, and the shout out to my manager, you know, Manny Sayuja. We can definitely work with you guys in making sure that, you know, you guys are taken care of, see kind of the hospitality that we have to offer and just the package that we can present to you guys. Because, you know, in the long run, you know, if we give you guys a good product, you guys bring us the people, you know, everybody is successful. And that's what we want, not only for our tribe, but for Arizona.
Right, that's correct. So those two individuals work with the resort corporation. If people have general requests and maybe they want to communicate with the tribe or with council.
So all general requests, and you know, Kevin, if you're watching, I know I didn't tell you I was going to put you on here, but Kevin Davidson, he's really the rock star of the economical development and planning in Peach Springs. You know, he does a lot. He's got a lot going on, but he doesn't have so much where he will not respond to your emails. He'll answer your phone calls. He'll, I know he's working really, really closely with the 1926 bicentennial for the Route 66. We recently had a gas station, Osterman gas station, that was placed in the Historical Preservation National Society. And he was a huge part of that. And he's been working on getting that renovated. He's been working on, there's just so much stuff that Kevin Davidson does in terms of assisting and developing. And definitely, if you have any questions, reach out to him. And he will be more than happy to kind of assist with that and to move forward with that. And
Okay, and then we're going to also provide your contact information, Longfeather.
yes, definitely contact me for anything that you guys may or may, if you guys just want to a general inquiry, if you just want to jump on the line and chat. Again, we're kind of focused towards small business and entrepreneurialism. So we try and help, in my office, I always say that we're dream makers. If we have an individual come into our office and say, "Hey, I want to start, a business on this, or I think I might want to do that." We really try and take their dream and really kind of just make it our own. And what help would we need, and what help, would we need to start growing something in that fashion? So, yeah,
Great.
shoot me a text, shoot me an email, and we'll definitely get out. Reach out to you and we can be in contact.
Well, thank you. And it looks like we have a few questions in the chat.
Yes, we had a question from April I was able to answer. We post every video and the transcript to our website. So if you missed anything, you'll be able to review the whole session, including the transcript, in a couple days when we post it.
Okay, great.
Well, thanks for the assist, Tyler.
Of course, that's what I'm here for.
And the entire team in the back scenes. Like this is amazing. Again, very proud to be a part of the first, Arizona Tourism University seminar. I think it really does say a lot about what Arizona is trying to accomplish with, highlighting again the 22 tribes of Arizona. I know often not, a lot of the smaller tribes we get overshadowed by, some of the more populated tribes in Arizona, but there are 22 of us. So we appreciate the opportunity. And again, like I said, every other tribe has their own story. Every other tribe has their own heroes. Every other tribe has their own, story of resiliency. And I can't touch enough on how resilient our ancestors were, and how we need as individuals and members of the community and tribes today, we need to start showing some of that resiliency that our ancestors have shown in the past. How can we continue to claim resiliency if we don't show that resiliency, or the strength if we don't show that strength? And I feel like by us coming out today and coming and joining the series, and just kind of telling a brief synopsis of our history and how we kind of dealt with the things that we've dealt with. And it just shows that we can accomplish anything. We can continue to move forward. And this it's the same as why, again, I don't want to touch too much on it, but I did found Innativators, which is a nonprofit for, Native Americans youth to kind of emerge in the STEM fields. I feel like we need, more representation for Native youth to see, more science, more technology, more engineering, and more mathematician professionals. And by highlighting the representation of those fields, we can reset the trajectory of where our youth are headed, and we can really ride this wave of technology and move with mainstream society, and not get left behind or not be overshadowed, but really kind of slingshot with them. And we just need more youth to be taking interest in this fields, in these fields. And so Innativators is kind of the
The
nonprofit
way
that
to
I
do it.
started. And
Right.
I think,
Mhm.
that's the way that we should do it, by showing our resiliency and our strength, and getting involved the emerging fields that are out there today.
Sure, and I think that that is, the youth need to be shown. If you don't have these positions on the reservation, somehow they have to know, they have to have a role model, they have to have a path to develop to go into tourism, or, if they want to be a scientist or a doctor, what is the path forward for them? So that's great. Well, I think
Uh,
we're going to wrap it
we
up.
have a question from Melanie.
Well, I so appreciate this session and just the inspiration, I think, for that messaging around resiliency. Just really good. Pick me up in the middle of the day. But I am down in Tucson, so I'm not too far. And I work for Herman Global. I'm a tourism research analyst, and we work with the state of Arizona and a number of other destinations, like Mesa Verde. They're one of my faves. But I had a question for you about just industry partners, especially from my position in research. How can, agencies and I mean, my team, they're wonderful storytellers too, but like how can agencies kind of partner with tribes and help kind of elevate and amplify some of the stories, or from a research perspective, like what would really, is there something that would empower you and your missions and what you're working on that really agencies could partner better on?
Well, what I would like to say is, it's about developing relationships, and you have to spend time with tribes. You can't just go in and say you're going to do research on them or
Right.
with them. That, it's going to take time, proposals. Again, you probably need to go through tribal council for something like that. So it's very delicate. I don't know what your
Oh yeah.
process would be, Longfeather.
And Melanie, so a
Yeah.
great question, and this question has been brought up not only by you but other professionals and in other fields, and it's always how do we get on the inside track, or how do we establish these relationships or these rapports with tribes? And I know from a personal level, you have say we have a tribal relations position, and representation really does matter in those positions. We can't have individuals who are tribal representatives or who are tribal relations professionals, and they really don't have kind of like that understanding of the individual tribe. And it really is kind of like, accreditation by association. So you really have to have like the credentials of, say, a community leader or a tribal leader. And there's many tribal professionals out there, tribal relations professionals out there who are willing to offer that assistance. And it's really kind of just taking them up on those roles and utilizing those services. I can name an individual off the top of my head. Um, Melody Lewis, she's a tribal relations professional, and her whole, consultation business is just getting, outside agencies into the door with tribal councils or into the door with tribal communities. And you really have to have that person to kind of lead you in, give you the accreditation, give you that insight. And then also you got to constantly be a part of the community. You can't just show up and expect to be like, oh, okay, this is going to work and this is how it works. There's a lot of traditional apprehension towards outsiders, especially in indigenous communities. And a lot of that, it's still the same way. There's always going to be apprehensions when working with, outside agencies, and especially if they don't come with a tribal relations professional, or if they're dealing with, say, a tribal relations representative, and they don't really have that tribalness about them. They kind of just it's just an afterthought. So I would just suggest, utilize the people, the consultations, the businesses out there, and that would really kind of get you in the door way, way, way quicker than it would be to, again, just to try and cold turkey it or cold call
Yeah.
it and get
And
in.
I should have probably reframed that because the agency perspective is definitely different than kind of my own. Because I did sustainable destination management, and I'm kind of looking at more of like a in service to partner with the tribe. Like, is there something we can do on a research side or from like an academic research perspective to kind of support or just partner in a way where we're providing a service or doing something to
Well,
help.
I'm going to interrupt you and say maybe that
Yeah.
is for an offline
Yeah, all good.
conversation so that we can learn a little bit more about some of the details of what you want to do, whether or not it would be feasible and how to best help you do that.
Yeah.
But we are running out of time, so we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Longfeather, for being our first presenter of our Cultural Connection series. We're very thankful that you were here.
So in Hualapai, we would just say Hamokia, which just means that's it.
That's it.
Hamokia, like you're done. Hamokia, that's it. That's all we
It's done.
got.
It's
And
finished.
then Honkia. That's the kind of thank you.
Cute.
But so we see like Hamokia, like hey ma Hamokia.
We thank you again to our listeners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon.